Breaking right now, the British royal family mired in one of its biggest crises in history.
That role that everybody knows, that myself and my wife wished to carry on, but was stopped from being able to do that.
There was no press conference, no warning, and no opportunity for further negotiation. A sealed decree had just crossed the Atlantic from the palace to California, carrying a signature that could forever change the fate of an entire family. In a few cold lines, two decisions were made. Harry would no longer be called Prince Harry, and Meghan would be banned from entering the United Kingdom indefinitely. Harry read the document alone. He quickly scanned each clause, trying to find an exception, a legal loophole, or any sign that the decision could still be reversed. But then his eyes stopped at a single sentence. The title that had been with him since birth had been revoked. It was more than just a title. It's tied to Harry's childhood, to Diana's death, to his years in the military, to his marriage to Meghan, and to his entire life of trying to escape the royal family, but never truly leaving it. Nearby, Meghan wasn't looking at the part about the title. She was looking at the travel ban. And then she understood the most terrible thing. She might never be able to return to England for a family wedding, a funeral, a private meeting, or even a final goodbye. But the decree contained an even more painful detail. William was tasked with directly overseeing its implementation. That meant the future king now had to slam the door shut on his own brother. Before we continue, tell me where you're following this story from. Leave your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next developments. Because this decree didn't originate from an interview, a memoir, or a public statement. Its true origins lie in a locked room at Windsor, where Harry made his final promise to his father and brother. But what happened in that room that turned a family promise into an irreversible sentence? And to understand why that decree could be so cruel, one needed to return to Windsor 3 weeks before all doors officially closed. That night, Harry wasn't summoned to hear the verdict. He was invited for one last chance. The meeting took place in a private room, far from the press cameras and the crowded palace corridors. There was no formal ceremony. No secretaries stood waiting outside to prepare the announcement. Just Charles, William, Harry, and a few senior representatives who had served under the late Queen. On the long table before them lay a brief proposal that could change Harry's entire future. The palace was willing to let him continue to use his princely title. He could still maintain direct contact with Charles without going through a layer of advisors or lawyers. He could be granted limited access to certain royal residences on approved occasions. And if all conditions are met, a small, tightly controlled public role might also be considered in the future. It's not a complete return, but it's not exile either. Charles sat at the head of the table. He didn't speak in the voice of a king giving orders. He spoke slowly like a father weary of watching his family fall apart through every interview, every newspaper article, and every public accusation. He told Harry that the only thing he needed wasn't a public apology, but a safe place where the family could talk, a place where private words wouldn't end up in a book, wouldn't become content for a documentary, wouldn't be edited into promotional material, wouldn't be used in a commercial project, and wouldn't become a weapon in the next dispute. Charles explained that he wasn't asking for silence to protect his pride. He was asking for it because every time a private conversation was leaked, the family lost another chance to speak truthfully to each other. Without privacy, there would be no trust. And without trust, any attempt at reconciliation would be just another public performance. Harry listened without interrupting. Before him lay an agreement, clearly stating that all future meetings had to be kept confidential. He would not be allowed to use family content in interviews, books, documentaries, or any commercial product without their consent. For a few seconds, the room was completely silent. Then Harry placed his hand on the agreement. He looked at Charles and said that he understood. He promised that what was said in that room would stay in that room. Charles exhaled slowly, as if for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that there was still a way out for the family. But on the opposite side, William couldn't fully share that hope. He sat silently watching his younger brother. William wanted to believe that promise. Part of him still remembered Harry from years past, the brother who had stood by him in the most difficult times. But another part couldn't forget the leaked conversations, the private details brought to public attention, and the attempts at reconciliation that ended in a new round of arguments. For Charles, the meeting at Windsor was the last chance to save their father-son relationship. For William, it was the final test to see if Harry could still be trusted. That night, Harry left Windsor with his title, with a path back home, and with a connection to his family. Everything seemed not entirely lost, but just 3 weeks later, a small mishap sent a documentary script to exactly where it should never have the desks of the palace lawyers. And what lay in that script made Charles realize that the promise made at Windsor might have been broken. 3 weeks after the promise at Windsor, that fragile hope crumbled, not because of a live interview, nor because of a public statement. It began with a seemingly minor mistake. A production assistant working on documents for an upcoming documentary mistakenly sent an incomplete draft to a legal address connected to the palace. Initially, the lawyers thought it was just a routine administrative error, but upon opening the document, they quickly realized something was amiss. The draft contained details never before published. There was Charles's private plea to preserve a safe space for his family. There was William's warning that trust could not be rebuilt if every conversation risked becoming media content. There were precise terms in the Windsor settlement proposal, including Harry being allowed to continue using his title, maintaining direct contact with his father, and possibly being considered for a limited public role in the future. No one outside that room should have known these things. And it was this detail that made the palace lawyers realize this couldn't be a coincidence. The draft was immediately sent to Charles. The king read it alone in his private study. He lingered longest on the section, explaining that the royal family wanted to control Harry and Meghan's public voice and influence. Meghan's name appeared next to the most controversial part. According to the draft's presentation, the Windsor meeting was no longer an attempt at reconciliation between a father and his two sons. It was described as evidence that the palace feared Harry and Meghan's influence and wanted to silence them. For Charles, it was a painful reversal of the entire meaning of the meeting. What he had once seen as an opportunity to protect his family from the media had now been turned into material for a commercial product. But Charles still didn't order the document released. He requested that the manuscript be sealed. No press release, no public rebuttal, no direct accusations against Harry or Meghan. Part of him still hoped to prevent the crisis from becoming a new public battle. William reacted completely differently. When he read the manuscript, he saw no production error. He saw the repetition of a pattern that had lasted for years. Each time the palace fell silent, another line was crossed. Each time Charles tried to protect Harry from the consequences, trust within the family weakened further. William told his father that the issue was no longer about how the document had been sent by mistake. The problem was that confidential messages from Windsor had left the room Harry had promised to protect. Harry quickly denied directly approving the content. He asserted that Meghan wasn't present at the Windsor meeting and couldn't have known exactly what had been said. He suggested the document may have been passed through staff advisors or those involved in the production process without his explicit consent. But that explanation didn't appease William. According to William, responsibility couldn't be separated from consequences simply by identifying who pressed the send button. A promise had been made. The information was still leaked, and a private attempt at reconciliation still appeared in the draft of a commercial project. Charles was caught between two positions. On one side was Harry, who said he didn't control every word. On the other side was William, who believed that if there were no clear consequences this time, no private family conversation could ever truly be safe. Finally, Charles agreed to let the two brothers meet one more time. It would be their final conversation before the palace made its decision. But before William entered the room, Charles had prepared two versions of the decree, one allowing Harry to retain his title under strict conditions, the other stripping it permanently. Harry's fate now rested on a signature he didn't yet know he would face. The meeting was arranged just hours after Charles agreed to give William one last chance. There was no legal counsel, no palace secretary, no cameras, and no prepared statements. Clarence House was unusually quiet that day. The corridors, usually filled with the footsteps of staff, were almost empty. The entire palace seemed to understand that the door to that room concealed a conversation that could decide the future of the entire family. Harry had been waiting. He stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, his eyes no longer angry as in previous arguments, but instead wary. He knew this meeting was important, but he didn't know what Charles had prepared behind it. William entered alone. He wasn't wearing his ceremonial uniform, nor was he carrying the thick stack of files he usually wore to official meetings. He held only a thin stack of documents in his hands. He placed it on the table in the middle of the room. No one spoke for the first few seconds. Finally, William broke the silence. He said there was still one last way. If Harry agreed to sign this agreement, things could still be stopped before it was too late. Harry bent down to look at the words before him. The conditions weren't long, but they were clear. He would retain his title as prince. In return, he had to sign a perpetual confidentiality agreement regarding all private family conversations. He had to acknowledge that the contents of the Windsor meeting should never appear in any documentary. He had to commit to not using the family conversations in books, interviews, or any future commercial projects. And from then on, all communication with the palace would be conducted under a tightly controlled mechanism to protect the privacy of all parties. Harry read the entire agreement. He didn't sign immediately. Instead, he looked up at William. His voice was calm, but disappointment was evident in every word. Harry insisted he hadn't directly approved every word in the documentary draft. He argued that the document may have passed through multiple production staff editors and processing stages before being mistakenly sent. He reiterated that Meghan had never been in the room at Windsor. According to Harry, it was impossible to hold the couple entirely responsible for an incomplete draft. William listened intently. He didn't interrupt. But when Harry did stop, William responded with a single concise sentence. Responsibility is inseparable from consequences. The room fell silent again. William continued, this time more slowly. He said that what hurt him most wasn't a manuscript sent by mistake. It was that every private family conversation now felt like preparation for something that would happen in the future. A father-son meeting was no longer simply a father-son meeting. An apology was no longer just an apology. And a chance for reconciliation was no longer guaranteed to remain within the four walls of the room. Harry clenched his hands. His composure began to crumble. He looked directly at William and asked a question they had both probably been thinking about for a long time. "Are you here as my brother, or as the future king?" William didn't flinch. He looked straight at his younger brother and answered, "I came in both roles, and you've made both impossible." The atmosphere in the room almost froze. Then William opened the file he was carrying. He took out two documents. He said Charles had prepared two options, one allowing Harry to retain the title under strict conditions. The other would permanently end the title that had been with Harry since birth. Charles hadn't signed yet. The king wanted this meeting to decide the final choice. Harry stared intently at the agreement. For a few seconds, William thought his brother would pick up the pen. But then Harry gently pushed the papers aside. He didn't sign. William didn't try to persuade him further. He understood that everything that needed to be said had been said. He slowly rose, looked at Harry one last time, and left the room. The door closed softly. But that sound was like the final blow to the last chance Charles had tried to hold on to. Harry still believed that the meeting had only determined whether he would retain his title. What he didn't know was that in another room in the palace, a secret council had begun considering even more serious measures. And this time, their focus wasn't just on Harry, but also on Meghan. The crisis had transcended the boundaries of a single family and transformed into a matter of security, legality, and the very existence of the monarchy. After Harry pushed the agreement aside and refused to sign, all hope for a private resolution was nearly lost. Minutes later, in a secluded room within the palace, a small group was summoned around a long, dark wood table. There were no reporters, no press secretaries, and no members of the family who weren't absolutely necessary. Those present understood they were no longer discussing a family conflict. They were deciding the ultimate limits the monarchy could set for self-protection. Sitting around the table were senior advisors, constitutional lawyers, security officials, representatives of the royal apparatus, Prince William and King Charles III. Before them lay files marked top secret, documenting years of warnings, failed attempts at reconciliation, and instances of private information being leaked to the public. The council quickly identified three major risks. The first risk concerned Harry directly. If he continues to use his royal title abroad while publicly criticizing the very institution that bestowed it, the palace will always be on the defensive. An advisor warned that every interview, every book, or every documentary could be promoted with the image of a prince confronting the British monarchy. Then, the title would cease to be a symbol of duty and become a tool for influence. The second risk is the leakage of private information. Lawyers argue that if private conversations continue to surface in commercial projects, the palace will no longer be able to conduct any genuine reconciliation. Every word spoken within the family could become a headline in the future. The third risk concerns Meghan. Just then, a security official placed a new report on the table. According to the report, Meghan was preparing to fly to London to attend a charity event that would be filmed. This plan had not received palace approval. The cameras would be following her, and the venue was close enough to a royal area to force a reaction from the palace. Advisors warned that such an appearance could lead the public to believe Meghan still represented the royal family. It could also force security officials to restrain her in front of the cameras, turning a private dispute into a public confrontation on British soil. More importantly, it would undermine the entire framework William was trying to establish. During the discussion, an advisor addressed Harry by his last name. Charles immediately looked up. "Use his first name," he said. The room fell silent. The king allowed them to assess Harry as a threat to the institution, but he wouldn't allow anyone to forget that the person being judged was still his son. Ultimately, the council proposed a combined measure. Harry would lose his title to protect royal authority. Meghan would be banned from entering the country to prevent another media crisis in Britain. Charles looked down at the document before him. He understood that this signature could protect the throne, but it would also change the family forever. The king took the pen and signed. Just hours later, the decree was no longer cold words on paper. It began to destroy plans, identities, and relationships on both sides of the Atlantic. Just hours after Charles's pen left the page, the decree began to spill from the silent walls of the palace. It was no longer a decision kept secret within top-secret files. It became an order that could block a flight, erase a name, and change how the world referred to a person. In California, Meghan had almost completed her preparations for her return to London. Her luggage was packed, her schedule confirmed, and her media team finalized the details for a televised charity event. This appearance was planned as a statement that even after leaving royal life, she still wielded influence in Britain and could still command public attention. But that plan ended before she could even board the plane. The official notification was sent to Meghan's legal team late that afternoon. It was brief, leaving no room for negotiation. Any attempt to enter the United Kingdom would be blocked under the decree that had just come into effect. In less than an hour, the entire trip was cancelled. In London, the organizers received a directive to act immediately. Meghan's name was removed from the program. Promotional materials featuring her were taken down. The pre-recorded introduction was also removed from the broadcast. A brief announcement was then made confirming that Meghan would not be appearing for reasons beyond the organizers' control. The event, designed to demonstrate her continued place in British public life, had become the clearest evidence that the door had closed. Meghan read the announcement without saying a word. She looked at the canceled schedule, then at Harry. What angered her wasn't just the trip being blocked. It was the feeling that the palace had reclaimed the power to decide where she could appear, even though she was no longer serving the royal family. Meanwhile, another process was quietly underway in London. Palace staff received instructions to revise all public records relating to Harry. The title Prince was removed from ceremonial lists, palace records, administrative documents, and any documents to be used in the future. New forms were sent to the relevant departments, along with a request to apply the revised name immediately. Harry saw the change on the screen of a laptop. His name was still there, but the title was gone. Initially, Harry reacted with anger. He demanded an explanation of the legal basis from his advisors, wanting to know if the decision could be suspended and if there were any avenues for appeal. But the more he looked at the blank space before him, the softer his voice became. That title was once tied to his childhood, to Diana, to his military service, and to the country he once called home. Now all that remains is a name that no longer holds a place within the institution that created it. Meghan wanted to react immediately. She believed that silence would make the palace decree seem reasonable and justified. An interview, a public statement, or a legal battle could show the world that they would not accept being treated that way. But Harry disagreed. Legal advisors warned that any public challenge could trigger a clause allowing the palace to release confidential correspondence from previous reconciliations. A new interview could turn all the promises, warnings, and controversies at Windsor into public documents. For the first time since receiving the decree, the two were not on the same side. Meghan wanted to fight. Harry wanted to talk to his father. He requested a direct call without a lawyer, without an assistant, and without William listening. It was no longer a conversation between a prince and a king. It was a conversation between a wounded son and a father, exhausted from choosing between family and the throne. But when Harry asked if his father still considered him his son, Charles's answer could not restore what the decree had taken away. That night, when the palace debates had subsided and the vast corridors were filled only with the footsteps of security forces, King Charles III sat alone in his private study. A copy of the decree lay before him, but the king no longer looked at the words. He understood that the decision had been made. The only thing left was to face the consequences that no law could alleviate. The telephone on his desk suddenly rang. Charles stared at the screen for a long time before answering. On the other end was Harry. For the first few seconds, neither spoke a word. The silence stretched on, carrying with it all the things they had never had the chance to say over the years. No advisors, no lawyers, no palace walls of formality. Only a father and son standing at opposite ends of an irreversible decision. Finally, Harry spoke first. His voice was lower than usual, devoid of the anger from their previous arguments. "Father, you still consider me your son, even though the crown no longer sees me as a prince, do you?" Charles didn't answer immediately. He closed his eyes, his hand gripping the phone tightly. It took a long time before he spoke. Yes, just a single word, but enough to break the silence between father and son. Harry took a deep breath. He said that what hurt him most was never just the loss of a title. For him, that title was the last thread connecting the present to the past. It was linked to the boy who had silently walked behind Princess Diana's coffin in the eyes of the world. It was linked to his years of military service, to the flag he had worn, and to the feeling of still belonging to his homeland, even though he lived half a world away from England. More importantly, it was the name the British people had known his entire life. Charles listened without interrupting. He understood what Harry was talking about, for he himself remembered the boy vividly. A child who had lost his mother too soon, forced to grow up in front of the world's cameras, carrying a pain that no one could bear for him. After another silence, Charles softly said that signing the decree was the most painful decision of his entire reign. If he had only looked at it with the heart of a father, he would never have wanted to sign that document. But as king, he saw no other way. Every time the palace tried to compromise, another boundary was crossed. In the end, he was forced to choose what he believed would maintain the stability of the regime, even if the price was his own family. Harry fell silent, then asked the question he had kept in his heart since receiving the decree. Is there still a way to reverse that decision? This time, Charles answered almost immediately. No. That definitive answer made both of them understand that no miracle would happen. The decree would not be overturned and time could not bring things back to how they were before. However, Charles slowly offered a private promise. He said that Harry would always be his son. Though the title was gone, the door to family and their private lives would not close. Father and son could still call each other whenever they needed to. Harry would never be treated like a stranger because of what had happened between him and the throne. In return, Charles only asked for one thing. This call had to remain a private conversation between father and son. It would not appear in any interviews, books, or documentaries, not to protect the king's image, but to preserve the last shred of trust remaining between them. Harry did not offer forgiveness. The wounds were too fresh to be healed with just a phone call. But after a few seconds of silence, he agreed not to conduct any interviews or take any legal action. That decision also meant that the confidential documents at Windsor remained sealed, and another public confrontation was temporarily halted. Father and son did not reconcile. But amidst the breakdown, they still maintained a fragile thread of privacy that hadn't been completely severed. By the next morning, the story was no longer just a family affair. The whole world knew. And when images of the two brothers silently walking behind Princess Diana's coffin appeared on television, the true cost of the new decree began to become clear. Television stations abruptly cut off their regular programming. Newspapers worked through the night. Outside Buckingham Palace, a growing crowd gathered, each with their own perspective on the decree that had altered the future of the royal family. One side argued that King Charles III and Prince William had done what was necessary. They believed the monarchy could not continue if private boundaries were constantly breached and royal titles were still used in public confrontations. But the other side saw a deeper tragedy. They believed a family should not need decrees, lawyers, and bans to resolve wounds that had never healed. A newspaper published a picture of the empty palace balcony. No Harry, no lengthy explanation. Just a void large enough to make the whole of England understand that what had been lost was not just a title, but a place within the family. William watched the news alone. When the image of him and Harry walking behind Princess Diana's coffin appeared on the screen, he immediately muted the television. Princess Catherine stood nearby and saw the change in her husband's face. She understood that William didn't feel victorious. He had defended the institution he would inherit, but had to do so against his younger brother, who had shared his greatest loss. In California, Harry left the room when an announcer called him the son of the king, but no longer the Prince of England. Later, Charles addressed the nation. He confirmed that the decree was in full force, with no exceptions, no appeals, and no new negotiations. But he didn't speak like a victorious king. He spoke like a father who understood that duty had kept the throne secure and that the family could never be the same again. Harry watched the speech alone. He picked up an old royal badge, looked at it for a long time, then put it in a drawer. He didn't destroy the past. He simply accepted that the past no longer determined his future. Meghan eventually abandoned her plans for legal action. William continued to shoulder the responsibilities of the heir. Catherine became the only one who truly understood the silent sacrifice behind that decision. Charles retained the authority of the monarchy, but lost hope for a complete family reunion. The monarchy survived, the decree was enforced. But when the palace doors closed, no one inside could truly call it a victory. In your opinion, did Charles protect the monarchy or go too far in turning a family crisis into a permanent separation? And if you were in William's position, would you choose to protect your family or the institution? Leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories. Thank you for watching.